This next question it's kind of just for me, but I assume that it's going to be interesting for others. It kind of dials into what you were saying about how the original sort of tribal belief structure in the Israelites recognized that there was a plurality of gods, but that they were, monogamous to their God, Yahweh.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, Now, I'm curious about the first lines of Genesis, which I know is usually translated in like the English version to be um, uh, something along the lines of "At first was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God." And I've
Hmm.
heard that the translation is something, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but the translation is something like, or in the beginning was the Logos, and then instead of God, they use the word Elohim, and that Elohim breaks down to masculine, feminine plurality. Can you maybe correct what I've got incorrect there and maybe explore it a little bit?
Yeah, it's pretty complicated that. In the beginning with the logos is something different.
Okay.
Um, that's the beginning of John, right? In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God, and so on and so forth, right? So that's the beginning of John. The first line of Genesis goes, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth," right? So the first line of Genesis. How much? I mean, I could talk to you about this for literally hours. There's whole books written about the first line of Genesis, but so Hebrew doesn't have any spaces. Back in the day, the whole text didn't have any spaces. It was written without spaces, like most ancient languages were, right? That's one thing. And it wasn't written with the vowels, right? So in the same way that hat and hot and hut and hit all mean different things because the vowels different, in Hebrew there aren't any vowels, right? So if you mess with the spacing and you mess with the vowel scheme was set in the 7th century AD. So before that, it was much more fluid. The meaning of it was much more fluid. And to cut a long story short, the first line of Genesis can also be translated, and this is recommended by Nachmanides, who is one of the greatest of Jewish sages. This is not like some weird, mad Kabbalist off at the edge of left field. This is he actually wrote the commentary on Genesis. He says if you take the first line and you break it up differently, it reveals different lines of different names of God, and this is one of the ways to break it up. In the head was created Elohim, and as you say, Elohim. It's masculine. El is masculine word. Elim is masculine plural. Ha, the hey is a feminine word, a feminine letter. So most feminine nouns end in ha, like the word Deborah or Hannah or Torah or pariah. All that kind of stuff ends in ha. So it does have both masculine, feminine, singular and plural, because the grammar around it is singular, but the ending is plural. So Elohim, and it's also abstract. So I don't know if you're familiar with when Jews say cheers, they say lachaim. You seen that? When they raise a glass, they say lachaim, right? So that's cheers, right? It's translated as to life, but it's a plural word. But it's not. Life is singular, but it's the abstract form of the word. So it's the abstract plural. And it's the abstract singular, if that makes sense. It's not actualized. So Elohim himself never appears in the world. When God puts his foot in the garden, it's Yahweh Elohim. When God talks to Abraham, it's El Shaddai. When he tells him to sacrifice his son. When Yahweh arrives, for example, he sends his angel to Abraham, he says, "Don't sacrifice your son." So you've got El Shaddai saying one thing, you've got Yahweh saying the other thing, and then Abraham goes, "Which one am I going to choose?" And he chooses Yahweh. I kind of see it as, like I said, no, I didn't say it to you. I said it to someone else. As the plug socket in the wall, right? That would be power. Elohim. Whatever you plug into it is up to you. You could plug in a toaster, you could plug in a drill, you could plug in an electric chair. Those are the expressions of the power in this world, but they're different to the actual power. The power itself is something you don't want to get too close. You don't want to stick your tongue in the plug, for example. You don't want to get too close to it, there's cautions in the Zohar. There's cautions in Jewish books about inquiring too closely into what is above and what is below, what is before and what is after. So, in terms of where are we talking about? The
I
first
was
line of the Bible?
I was asking you about the first line of the Bible and just unpacking where I was unpacking this idea of the Elohim.
Elohim, yeah. So Elohim, it's unmanifested potential. Another way of looking at it is the vowel that begins with ah ah ah. It's ah. It's the only vowel which is written, and it can be pronounced ah yeah or and it's written the same, but it's pronounced in all these different ways. So it's an open, vibrated sound, right? A flow of energy which doesn't have edges, right? Which is different to like the Bible begins. The first line there begins Bereshit, begins with b, and Aleph in one of the Kabbalistic texts. Aleph, the first letter, goes to God and says, "I am the first of the letters. Why didn't you begin the book with me?" And he goes, it begins with Bur because Bur is a house. It's open. It's the bait looks like this, right? So it's open at one end. Aleph isn't open. Aleph is like infinite, and you don't want to inquire into the infinite. You go crazy if you inquire into the infinite. George Cantor, who invented the infinite set, as soon as he invented it, he checked himself into the mental hospital, and he's in and out of the mental hospital the rest of his life. Right? Inquiring into infinity makes you insane.
That's not what the Toad people say.
Well, look at those guys, man. Look at Octavia. That guy's completely mental and dangerous. It begins with a "b," and the word "baby" begins with "b," and the baby begins babbling. Right? We get a word "begin." It also begins with "b." Babies start by murmuring, and then they start mumbling, and then they start babbling. It goes from the first noise a baby makes is ah. You put a breast in its mouth and it goes mmm. Now it's still that kind of vowel sound being made, except it's with the mouth closed. But it hasn't got a break. You can how do you put this? There's no control of the breath. There's no division of sections of breath. Right? When you get to b, k, f, sh, d, all these kind of things, they actually stop and start. So we start to break up the breath with the letter b. That's why babies begin by babbling, and that's the first noise that most babies make, which is the first kind of active sound. So in Hebrew, the word father is abba, and the word mother is amma, right? Amma doesn't stop the flow of breath. Abba does stop the flow of breath because you've got to control. So Aleph is unbroken. Elohim, which means Aleph, is unbroken power, right? When it comes into the world, it comes in as Yah, Yahweh Yireh, Yah. Or normally it starts with the letter Yah, which is a semi-vowel, which is different. It's not unbroken. You can't extend the Yah sound. You can extend the ah sound. You can't extend the Yah sound, like the word light year. It's a passing sound. So you see what I mean? The flow remains open, but it marks a point in time. Light year or yes. You can't go yee. You can't extend that sound, right? So when the phonics of it, when the yeah, when the power comes into the world at a point, it makes a yeah. Now the letter yeah in Hebrew is yod, which also means yad, for example, means a hand, or it means to point, or it means a place or a space. Yeah, right. It's a very different type of energy. It kind of manifests in time in a way that ah doesn't. And the way they behave in the Bible is completely different, right? Elohim never manifests in space. He's always there, kind of behind the scenes, turning over empires, and making women's get pregnant and stuff like that. Growth is something to do with Elohim. But the moody guys who come into the world they generally begin with Yah, or sometimes El Shaddai and things like this. However, I mean, I could talk to this for hours. I think I would rather you read this. I'm going to send you. I'll tell you which particular chapter to read because I've got to go. Literally, I've got to go and meet someone in 15 minutes, and he's half an hour away.
That's perfect. That's perfect. In fact, why don't you tell me what chapter it is here on the recording, so people who are after listening to this very inspiredly going to purchase your book will know where to look to learn more.
Okay, so the chapter I'm talking about is called "In the Beginning," and the "b" is the phoneme "b," as in, and it's chapter. Where is it here? I'll find it because it's pretty. in the beginning, right? And that is page 89 of my book. Now, that explains it a lot
Is
more
it
eloquent.
Neuroapocalypse, you mean?
Neuroapocalypse, yeah.
Great. Well, Danny, thank you so much for your time today, and I look forward to maybe meeting you in person one day.
Cool, brilliant, man. If you're in town, give me a shout.